讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote。我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第56節，呢一節嘅名叫做 Of the prodigious and unparalleled battle that took place between Don Quixote of La Mancha and the lackey Tosilos in defense of the daughter of Doña Rodriguez。上一回就講到 Sancho 回到伯爵夫婦家嘅路上就不慎，連人帶驢就跌咗落佢個窿度，叫天不應，叫地不聞。過咗一日一夜之後，終於就俾路過嘅人救翻上嚟。而路過呢個人湊巧就係 Don Quixote。原本兩人就隔空互相喺度大叫啦，因為都睇唔清楚對方嘅樣，要花咗一番功夫啊，先至可以確認身份。而喺個洞穴入面呢，Sancho 就大聲咁樣說出佢嘅心底話，就係佢真係好想翻去 Don Quixote 嘅身邊。Sancho 佢自己講出口。好，咁我哋睇下呢一節講翻 Don Quixote 佢嘅決鬥究竟會係一個咩狀況。
The Duke and Duchess had no reason to regret the joke that had been played upon Sancho Panza in giving him the government, especially as their majordomo returned the same day, and gave them a minute account of almost every word and deed that Sancho uttered or did during the time, and to wind up with, eloquently described to them the attack upon the island and Sancho's fright and departure, with which they were not a little amused. After this, the history goes on to say that the day fixed for the battle arrived, and that the Duke, after having repeatedly instructed his lackey Tosilos how to deal with Don Quixote so as to vanquish him without killing or wounding him, gave orders to have the heads removed from the lances, telling Don Quixote that Christian charity, on which he plumed himself, could not suffer the battle to be fought with so much risk and danger to life, and that he must be content with the offer of battlefield on his territory, and not push such an arduous venture to its extreme limits. Don Quixote bade his Excellence arrange all matters connected with the affair as he pleased, as on his part he would obey him in everything. The dread day, then, having arrived, and the Duke having ordered a spacious stand to be erected facing the court of the castle for the judges of the field and the appellant duennas, mother and daughter, vast crowds flocked from all the villages and hamlets of the neighborhood to see the novel spectacle of the battle, nobody, dead or alive, in those parts having ever seen or heard of such a one. The first person to enter the field and the lists was the master of ceremonies, who surveyed and paced the whole ground to see that there was nothing unfair and nothing concealed to make the combatants stumble or fall. Then the duennas entered and seated themselves, enveloped in mantles covering their eyes, nay, even their bosoms, and displaying no slight emotion as Don Quixote appeared in the lists. Shortly afterwards, accompanied by several trumpets and mounted on a powerful steed that threatened to crush the whole place, the great lackey Tosilos made his appearance on one side of the courtyard with his visor down and stiffly cased in a suit of stout shining armor. The horse was a manifest Frieslander, broad-backed and flea-bitten, and with 100 of wool hanging to each of his fetlocks. The gallant combatant came well primed by his master the Duke as to how he was to bear himself against the valiant Don Quixote of La Mancha, being warned that he must on no account slay him, but strive to shirk the first encounter so as to avoid the risk of killing him, as he was sure to do if he met him full tilt. He crossed the courtyard at a walk, and coming to where duennas were placed, stopped to look at her who demanded him for a husband. The marshal of the field summoned Don Quixote, who had already presented himself in the courtyard, and standing by the side of Tosilos, he addressed the duennas, and asked them if they consented that Don Quixote of La Mancha should do battle for their right. They said they did, and that whatever he should do in that behalf they declared rightly done, final and valid. By this time the Duke and Duchess had taken their places in the gallery commanding the enclosure, which was filled to overflowing with a multitude of people eager to see this perilous and unparalleled encounter. The conditions of the combat were that if Don Quixote proved the victor, his antagonist was to marry the daughter of Doña Rodriguez, but if he should be vanquished, his opponent was released from the promise that was claimed against him and from all obligations to give satisfaction. The master of the ceremonies apportioned the sun to them, and stationed them, each on the spot where he was to stand. The drums beat, the sound of trumpets filled the air, the earth trembled underfoot. The hearts of the gazing crowd were full of anxiety, some hoping for a happy issue, some apprehensive of an untoward ending to the affair. And lastly, Don Quixote, commending himself with all his heart to God our Lord and to the lady Dulcinea del Toboso, stood waiting for them to give the necessary signal for the onset. Our lackey, however, was thinking of something very different. He only thought of what I am now going to mention. It seems that as he stood contemplating his enemy, she struck him as the most beautiful woman he had ever seen all his life, and a little blind boy whom in our streets they commonly called Love had no mind to let slip the chance of triumphing over a lackey heart, and adding it to the list of his trophies, and so, stealing gently upon him unseen, he drove a dart 2 yards long into the poor lackey's left side and pierced his heart through and through, which he was able to do quite at his ease, for Love is invincible, and comes in and goes out as he likes, without anyone calling him to account for what he does. Well then, when they gave the signal for the onset, our lackey was in an ecstasy, musing upon the beauty of her whom he had already made mistress of his liberty, and so he paid no attention to the sound of trumpet, unlike Don Quixote, who was off the instant he heard it, and at the highest speed Rocinante was capable of, set out to meet his enemy, his good squire Sancho shouting lustily as he saw him start, "God guide thee, cream and flower of knights errant! God give thee the victory, for thou hast the right on thy side." But though Tosilos saw Don Quixote coming at him, he never stirred a step from the spot where he was posted, and instead of doing so, called loudly to the marshal of the field, to whom when he came up to see what he wanted, he said, "Señor, is not this battle to decide whether I marry or do not marry that lady?" "Just so," was the answer. "Well then," said the lackey, "I feel qualms of conscience, and I should lay a heavy burden upon it if I were to proceed any further with the combat. I therefore declare that I yield myself vanquished, and that I am willing to marry the lady at once." The marshal of the field was lost in astonishment at the words of Tosilos, and as he was one of those who were privy to the arrangement of the affair, he knew not what to say in reply. Don Quixote pulled up in mid-career when he saw that his enemy was not coming on to the attack. The Duke could not make out the reason why the battle did not go on, but the marshal of the field hastened to him to let him know what Tosilos said, and he was amazed and extremely angry at it. In the meantime, Tosilos advanced to where Doña Rodriguez sat and said in a loud voice, "Señora, I am willing to marry your daughter, and I have no wish to obtain by strife and fighting what I can obtain in peace and without any risk to my life." The valiant Don Quixote heard him and said, "As that is the case, I am released and absolved from my promise. Let them marry by all means, and as God our Lord has given her, may Saint Peter add his blessing." The Duke had now descended to the courtyard of the castle, and going up to Tosilos, he said to him, "Is it true, Sir Knight, that you yield yourself vanquished, and that moved by scruples of conscience you wish to marry this damsel?" "It is, Señor," replied Tosilos. "And he does well," said Sancho. "For what thou hast to give to the mouse, give to the cat, and it will save thee all trouble." Tosilos meanwhile was trying to unlace his helmet, and he begged them to come to his help at once, as his power of breathing was failing him, and he could not remain so long shut up in that confined space. They removed it in all haste, and his lackey features were revealed to public gaze. At this sight, Doña Rodriguez and her daughter raised a mighty outcry, exclaiming, "This is a trick! This is a trick! They have put Tosilos, my lord the Duke's lackey, upon us in place of the real husband. The justice of God and the king against such trickery, not to say roguery." "Do not distress yourselves, ladies," said Don Quixote, "for this is no trickery or roguery. Or if it is not the Duke who is at the bottom of it, but those wicked enchanters who persecute me, and who, jealous of my reaping the glory of this victory, have turned your husband's features into those of this person, who you say is a lackey of the Duke's. Take my advice, and notwithstanding the malice of my enemies, marry him, for beyond a doubt he is the one you wish for a husband." When the Duke heard this, all his anger was near vanishing in a fit of laughter, and he said, "The things that happened to Señor Don Quixote are so extraordinary that I am ready to believe this lackey of mine is not one. But let us adopt this plan and device. Let us put off the marriage for, say, a fortnight, and let us keep this person about whom we are uncertain in close confinement, and perhaps in the course of that time he may return to his original shape. For the spite which the enchanters entertain against Señor Don Quixote cannot last so long, especially as it is of so little advantage to them to practice these deceptions and transformations." "Oh, Señor," said Sancho, "those scoundrels are well used to changing whatever concerns my master from one thing into another. A knight that he overcame some time back, called the Knight of the Millers, they turned into the shape of the bachelor Samson Carrasco of our town, and a great friend of ours. And my lady Dodina de Toboso they have turned into a common country wench, so I suspect this lackey will have to live and die a lackey all the days of his life." Here the Rodriguez daughter exclaimed, "Let him be who he may, this man that claims me for a wife, I am thankful to him for the same, for I had rather be the lawful wife of a lackey than the cheated mistress of a gentleman, though he who played me false is nothing of the kind." To be brief, all the talk and all that had happened ended in Tosilos being shut up until it was seen how his transformation turned out. All hailed Don Quixote as victor, but the greater number were vexed and disappointed at finding that the combatants they had been so anxiously waiting for had not battered one another to pieces, just as the boys are disappointed when the man they are waiting to see hang does not come out, because the prosecution or the court has pardoned him. The people dispersed. The Duke and Don Quixote returned to the castle. They locked up Tosilos. Doña Rodriguez and her daughter remained perfectly contented when they saw that anyway the affair must end in marriage, and Tosilos wanted nothing else.
好，咁呢一節咧就形容咗呢個決鬥，呢個下人 Tosilos 同埋 Don Quixote 嘅騎士之間嘅決鬥。大家都隆重其事，揾咗一塊地，搭咗個台，邀請咗鄉親父老嚟睇。Doña Rodriguez 同埋佢個女咧都喺現場嘅。當呢個下人喺比賽前夕見到 Doña Rodriguez 嘅女兒嘅時候咧，佢就深深被佢嘅美色所吸引住，就暗自決定咧要迎娶 Doña Rodriguez 嘅女喎。佢點做咧？佢就喺決鬥嘅最前夕就大聲同公證人講，佢話：係唔係如果我決定同 Doña Rodriguez 嘅女結婚就唔需要決鬥？佢哋話係，咁佢話咁我而家就放棄我決鬥，因為我願意娶佢個女。咁眾人就譁然，包括Don Quixote在內。不過咧Don Quixote亦都樂於見到咁樣嘅狀況，佢哋就話：如果你係咁決定嘅，咁我恭喜你啦！亦都希望上天亦都保佑你哋。大家咧原本就一心諗住睇到決鬥，但係咧就冇得睇，咁咧就散去啦。Doña Rodriguez 同埋佢個女，當佢見到 Tosilos 除低佢頭盔，見到佢嘅面貌嘅時候咧，亦都大驚喜上嚟，就話呢個唔單止係一個詭計，仲要係一個無賴下流嘅行為喎，一個欺騙嘅行為。喂，呢個根本就唔係佢個女嘅原配。但係佢個女咧亦都講出咗，佢話：我寧願要一個我唔識嘅願意娶我嘅下人，都唔想要一個瞞騙我嘅悔婚者。Don Quixote又企出嚟話啦。呢個人啊，我相信咧，佢一定係你嘅丈夫，只不過咧係嗰啲施法術嘅巫師啊，針對我嘅巫師施咗法落去，令到佢改變咗佢嘅容顏，變咗做下人嘅啫。我確信佢係你丈夫嚟。公爵聽到Don Quixote咁講，都不禁笑起上嚟啦。於是乎佢打完場，姑且咧就當佢係受咗法術嘅影響，不如咁。我哋將呢個 Tosilos 鎖起佢1個禮拜，觀察下佢。相信呢啲巫術唔會話可以咁長久嘅，佢只係想令到Don Quixote難過嘅啫。咁我相信呢1個禮拜後呢件事就會水落石出。於是乎咧就鎖起咗 Tosilos， 然之後兩母女都好開心咁樣返去佢哋嘅城堡啦。眾人咧亦都散去。好，我哋睇下呢一字有啲咩詞同大家分享。題目有呢個字嘅 prodigious。有2個意思嘅，第一個係形容詞 remarkably or impressively great in extent, size or degree， 一個好出類拔萃嘅狀態。另外一個意思係古字，就係文中嘅意思啦 ，unnatural or abnormal， 一個唔自然非尋常嘅狀態，形容呢個決鬥咧係唔尋常嘅。Shirk, S-H-I-R-K 動詞 avoid or neglect 括弧 a duty or responsibility 規避迴避一啲責任。好，我呢節分享到嚟呢度，下一節再有得讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第57節，呢一節叫做 Which treats of how Don Quixote took leave of the Duke and of what followed with the witty and impudent Altisidora, one of the Duchess's damsels。上一回咧就形容 Don Quixote 同埋伯爵嘅下人嘅決鬥，下人個名叫做 Tosilos。當佢見到 Rodriguez 嘅女嘅時候，就俾佢嘅美貌所打動，決定當住咁多人面前就承認佢對佢嘅傾慕，然之後咧放棄決鬥，直接就同佢兒咧成婚嘅。Don Quixote當下咧亦都非常之冷靜，就同大家講咧，你哋而家見到呢個 Tosilos 未必就係唔係悔婚者嚟㗎，佢極有可能係，只不過咧佢中咗巫師嘅法術。改變咗佢嘅容顏，嗱你將佢鎖起上嚟，過幾日之後可能個魔法就會衰退，顯出佢嘅本來嘅樣貌。咁伯爵當然大笑咁非常之同意。Rodriguez 個女咧亦都好高興喎，因為咧有個人咁當眾向佢示愛，而佢都認為佢寧願要樣貌被模糊咗嘅下人，都唔想要一個悔婚者喎。咁呢件事咧就算係告一段落啦。好，我哋睇下呢一節 Don Quixote 又點樣重新上路。
Don Quixote now felt it right to quit a life of such idleness as he was leading in the castle, for he fancied that he was making himself sorely missed by suffering himself to remain shut up and inactive amid the countless luxuries and enjoyments his hosts lavished upon him as a knight. And he felt too that he would have to render a strict account to heaven of that indolence and seclusion. And so one day he asked the Duke and Duchess to grant him permission to take his departure. They gave it, showing at the same time that they were very sorry he was leaving them. The Duchess gave his wife's letters to Sancho Panza, who shed tears over them, saying, "Who would have thought that such grand hopes as the news of my government bred in my wife Teresa Panza's breast would end in my going back now to the vagabond adventures of my master Don Quixote of La Mancha? Still, I'm glad to see my Teresa behaved as she ought in sending the acorns, for if she had not sent them, I've been sorry, and she'd have shown herself ungrateful. It is a comfort to me that they can't call that present a bribe, for I had got the government already when she sent them, and it's but reasonable that those who have had a good turn done them should show their gratitude, if it's only with a trifle. After all, I went to the government naked, and I come out of it naked, so I can say with a safe conscience, and that's no small matter. Naked I was born, naked I find myself, I neither lose nor gain." Thus did Sancho soliloquize on the day of the departure, as Don Quixote, who had the night before taken leave of the Duke and Duchess, coming out made his appearance at an early hour in full armour in the courtyard of the castle. The whole household of the castle were watching him from the corridors, and the Duke and Duchess too came out to see him. Sancho was mounted on his dapple, with his alforjas, valets, and proving supremely happy because the Duke's majordomo, the same that had acted the part of the Trivaldi, had given him a small purse with 200 gold crowns to meet the necessary expenses of the road. But of this Don Quixote knew nothing as yet, while all were, as has been said, observing him. Suddenly, from among the duennas and handmaidens, the impudent and witty Altisidora lifted up her voice and said in pathetic tones, "Give ear, cruel knight. Drew rein, where's the need of spurring the flanks of that ill-broken steed? From what art thou flying? No dragon I am, not even a sheep, but a tender young lamb. Thou hast jilted a maiden as fair to behold as nymph of Diana or Venus of old. Vireno, Aeneas, what words shall I call thee? Barbarous go with thee, all evil before thee. In thy claws, ruthless robber, thou bearest away the heart of a meek, loving maid for thy prey. 3 kerchiefs thou stealest, and garters a pair, from legs than the whitest of marble more fair, and the sighs that pursued thee would burn to the ground 2,000 Troy towns, if so many were found. Biranos, Aeneas, what word shall I call thee? Barbarous go with thee, or evil befall thee. May no bowels of mercy to Sancho be granted, and thy Dulcinea be left still enchanted. May thy falsehood to me find its punishment in her, for in my land the just often pays for the sinner. May thy grandest adventures discomfitures prove. May thy joys be all dreams and forgotten thy love. Birano, Aeneas, what word shall I call thee? Barabbas go with thee, or evil befall thee. May thy name be abhorred, for thy conduct to ladies, from London to England, from Seville to Cadiz. May thy cards be unlucky, thy hands contain ne'er a king, 7 or ace, when thou playest primera. When thy corns are cut, may it be to the quick. When thy grinders are drawn, may the roots of them stick. Birano, Aeneas, what word shall I call thee? Barbarous go with thee, or evil before thee. All the while the unhappy Altisidora was bewailing herself in the above strain, Don Quixote stood staring at her. Without uttering a word in reply to her, he turned round to Sancho and said, Sancho, my friend, I conjure thee by the life of thy forefathers, tell me the truth. Say, hast thou by any chance taken the 3 kerchiefs and the garters this love-sick maid speaks of? To this Sancho made answer, the 3 kerchiefs I have, but the garters as much as over the hills of Ubeda. The Duchess was amazed at Altisidora's assurance. She knew that she was bold, lively, and impudent, but not so much so as to venture to make free in this fashion, and not being prepared for the joke. Her astonishment was all the greater. The Duke had a mind to keep up the sport, so he said, It does not seem to me well done in you, Sir Knight, that after having received the hospitality that has been offered you in this very castle, you should have ventured to carry off even 3 kerchiefs, not to say my handmaid's garters. It shows a bad heart, and does not tally with your reputation. Restore her garters, or else I defy you to mortal combat, for I am not afraid of rascally enchanters changing or altering my features as they change his who encountered you into those of my lackey, Tosilos. God forbid, said Don Quixote, that I should draw my sword against your illustrious person from which I have received such great favours. The kerchiefs I will restore, as Sancho says he has them. As to the garters, that is impossible, for I have not got them, neither has he. And if your handmaiden here will look in her hiding places, depend upon it she will find them. I have never been a thief, my Lord Duke, nor do I mean to be so long as I live, if God sees not to have me in his keeping. This damsel by her own confession speaks as one in love, for which I am not to blame, and therefore need not ask pardon, either of her or of your excellence, whom I entreat to have a better opinion of me, and once more to give me leave to pursue my journey. And may God so prosper it, Señor Don Quixote, said the Duchess, that we may always hear good news of your exploits. God speed you, for the longer you stay, the more you inflame the hearts of the damsels who behold you. And as for this one of mine, I will so chastise her that she will not transgress again, either with her eyes or with her words. One word and no more, O valiant Don Quixote, I ask you to hear, said Altisidora, and that is that I beg your pardon about the theft of the garters. For by God and upon my soul I have got them on, and I have fallen into the same blunder as he did who went looking for his ass, being all the while mounted on it. Didn't I say so? Said Sancho. I am a likely one to hide thefts. Why, if I wanted to deal in them, opportunities came ready enough to me in my government. Don Quixote bowed his head, and saluted the Duke and Duchess and all the bystanders, and wheeling Rocinante round, Sancho following him on Dapple, he rode out of the castle, shaping his course for Saragossa.
好，咁呢一節就有一個小插曲。當傑克提唔滿意或者不甘於留喺伯爵夫婦家享受榮華富貴啊，佢唔中意，佢係一個遊俠，咁佢一定要上路嘅。佢就向伯爵夫婦提出佢要離開啦。到離開當日，眾人都喺城堡度睇住當傑克提同埋 Sancho 上路，大家都係歡送嘅。除咗一位就係其中之一個女僕，就係 Altisidora。前幾回都有提過佢向 Don Quixote 嘅示愛啦， 而Don Quixote亦都隔住空氣咧，就大聲拒絕，因為眾所周知佢嘅情人就係一個虛幻嘅 Dulcinea。而呢一刻 Altisidora 唔忍心睇住Don Quixote走，佢就喺眾人面前唱咗隻歌，歌詞全部都係詛咒嚟嘅，詛咒Don Quixote拒絕咗佢嘅愛，偷咗佢啲嘢，一啲貼身嘅衣物。呢件事就令到Don Quixote百詞莫辯，佢即時都同 Sancho 講：喂，究竟會唔會係你偷咗人哋嘅貼身衣物啊？Sancho 都無可奈何承認：我係偷咗嘅，不過咧我已經還翻俾佢噶啦。而Altisidora都驚覺，其實佢自己已經係着緊呢啲遺失咗嘅衣物，於是乎就打個圓場啦，道歉。眾人就見到，件事已經搞掂啦，清白啦，咁當然我哋咧可以上路。好，我哋睇下呢一節有啲咩字大家分享。Abhor A-B-H-O-R 動詞 regard with disgust and hatred 可惡啦，可憎啦。如果係形容詞就係 abhorrent， 呢個係動詞 abhor。好，呢一節分享到嚟呢度，下一節再繼續嚟聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第58節，呢一節嘅名叫做 Which tells how adventures came crowding on Don Quixote in such numbers that they gave one another no breathing time。題目就好似將會發展嘅事好緊湊。睇翻上一回就係一個輕鬆嘅插曲，當Quixote終於要離開伯爵城堡啦，連同 Sancho 一齊上路啊！臨別秋波，其中之個女僕Altisidora就唱一隻歌去詛咒Don Quixote，似乎有啲違反其他人嘅歡送，詛咒Don Quixote，因為佢拒絕咗佢呢個作為女性嘅愛啊！後來 Sancho 就承認咗係佢偷咗 Altisidora 嘅貼身衣物，而令到咧有個咁嘅誤會。咁而 Altisidora 亦都即時向住大家道歉，就話佢都好似搞錯咗，記錯啲嘢，同大家講聲再見。好，我哋睇下呢一節繼續發生啲咩事。
When Don Quixote saw himself in open country, free, and relieved from the attentions of Altisidora, he felt at his ease, and in fresh spirits to take up the pursuit of chivalry once more. And turning to Sancho, he said, Freedom, Sancho, is one of the most precious gifts that heaven has bestowed upon men. No treasures that the earth holds buried or the sea conceals can compare with it. For freedom, as for honor, life may and should be ventured, and on the other hand, captivity is the greatest evil that can fall to the lot of man. I say this, Sancho, because thou hast seen the good cheer, the abundance we have enjoyed in this castle we are leaving. Well then, amid those dainty banquets and snow-cooled beverages, I felt as though I were undergoing the straits of hunger, because I did not enjoy them with the same freedom as if they had been mine own. For the sense of being under an obligation to return benefits and favors received is a restraint that checks the independence of the spirit. Happy he to whom heaven has given a piece of bread for which he is not bound to give thanks to any but heaven itself. For all your worship says, said Sancho, it is not becoming that there should be no thanks on our part for 200 gold crowns that the Duke's majordomo has given me in a little purse which I carry next my heart, like a warming plaster or comforter, to meet any chance calls, for we shan't always find castles where they'll entertain us. Now and then we may light upon roadside inns where they'll cudgel us. In conversation of this sort, the knight and squire errant were pursuing their journey, when, after they had gone little more than half a league, they perceived some dozen men, dressed like labourers, stretched upon their cloaks on the grass of a green meadow, eating their dinner. They had beside them what seemed to be white sheets concealing some objects under them, standing upright or lying flat, and arranged at intervals. Don Quixote approached the diners, and saluting them courteously first, he asked them what it was those cloths covered. Señor, answered one of the party, under these cloths are some images carved in relief intended for a retablo we are putting up in our village. We carry them covered up that they may not be soiled, and on our shoulders that they may not be broken. With your good leave, said Don Quixote, I should like to see them, for images that are carried so carefully no doubt must be fine ones. I should think they were, said the other. Let the money they cost speak for that, for as a matter of fact, there is not one of them that does not stand us in more than 50 ducats, and that your worship may judge. Wait a moment, you shall see with your own eyes. And getting up from his dinner, he went and uncovered the first image, which proved to be one of St. George on horseback, with a serpent writhing at his feet, and a lance thrust down his throat, with all that fierceness that is usually depicted. The whole group was one blaze of gold, as the saying is. On seeing it, Don Quixote said, that knight was one of the best knights-errant the army of heaven ever owned. He was called Don St. George, and he was moreover a defender of maidens. Let us see this next one. The men covered it, and it was seen to be that of St. Martin on his horse, dividing his cloak with the beggar. The instant Don Quixote saw it, he said, this knight, too, was one of the Christian adventurers, but I believe he was generous rather than valiant, as thou mayest perceive, Sancho, by his dividing his cloak with the beggar and giving him half of it. No doubt it was winter at the time, for otherwise he would have given him the whole of it, so charitable was he. It was not that, most likely, said Sancho, but that he held with the proverb that says, for giving and keeping there's need of brains. Don Quixote laughed, and asked them to take off the next cloth, underneath which was seen the image of the patron saint of the Spains seated on horseback, his sword stained with blood, trampling on Moors and treading heads underfoot. And on seeing it, Don Quixote exclaimed, Aye, this is a knight, and of the squadrons of Christ. This one is called Don St. James the Moor Slayer, one of the bravest saints and knights the world ever had or heaven has now. They then raised another cloth, which it appeared covered St. Paul falling from his horse, with all the details that are usually given in representations of his conversion. When Don Quixote saw it, rendered in such lifelike style that one would have said Christ was speaking and Paul answering, this, he said, was in his time the greatest enemy that the Church of God our Lord had, and the greatest champion it will ever have, a knight-errant in life, a steadfast saint in death, an untiring laborer in the Lord's vineyard, a teacher of the Gentiles, whose school was heaven, and whose instructor and master was Jesus Christ himself. There were no more images, so Don Quixote bade them cover them up again, and said to those who had brought them, I take it as a happy omen, brothers, to have seen what I have. For these saints and knights were of the same profession as myself, which is the calling of arms. Only there is this difference between them and me, that they were saints, and fought with divine weapons, and I am a sinner, and fight with human ones. They won heaven by force of arms, for heaven suffereth violence, and I, so far, know not what I have won by dint of my sufferings. But if my Dulcinea de Toboso were to be released from hers, perhaps with mended fortunes and a mind restored to itself, I might direct my steps in a better path than I am following at present. May God hear and sin be death, said Sancho to this. The men filled with wonder, as well at the figure as at the words of Don Quixote, though they did not understand one half of what he meant by them. They finished their dinner, took their images on their backs, and bidding farewell to Don Quixote, resumed their journey. Sancho was amazed afresh at the extent of his master's knowledge, as much as if he had never known him, for it seemed to him that there was no story or event in the world that he had not at his fingers' ends and fixed in his memory. And he said to him, In truth, master mine, if this that has happened to us today is to be called an adventure, it has been one of the sweetest and pleasantest that have befallen us in the whole course of our travels. We have come out of it unbelabored and undismayed. Neither have we drawn sword, nor have we smitten the earth with our bodies, nor have we been left famishing. Blessed be God that he has let me see such a thing with my own eyes. Thou sayest well, Sancho, said Don Quixote, but remember all times are not alike, nor do they always run the same way, and these things the vulgar commonly call omens, which are not based upon any natural reason, will by him who is wise be esteemed and reckoned happy accidents merely. One of these believers in omens will get up of a morning, leave his house, and meet a friar of the order of the blessed Saint Francis, and as if he had met a griffin, he will turn about and go home. With another Mendoza, the salt is spilt on his table, the gloom is spilt over his heart, as if nature was obliged to give warning of coming misfortunes by means of such trivial things as these. The wise man and the Christian should not trifle with what it may please heaven to do. Scipio, on coming to Africa, stumbled as he leaped on shore. His soldiers took it as a bad omen, but he, clasping the soil with his arms, exclaimed, "Thou canst not escape me, Africa, for I hold thee tight between my arms." Thus, Sancho, meeting those images has been to me a most happy occurrence. "I can well believe it," said Sancho, "but I wish your worship would tell me what is the reason that the Spaniards, when they are about to give battle, in calling on that St. James the Moor slayer, say Santiago and close Spain. Is Spain then open so that it is needful to close it? Or what is the meaning of this form?" "Thou art very simple, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "God, look you, gave that great knight of the Red Cross to Spain as her patron saint and protector, especially in those hard struggles the Spaniards had with the Moors, and therefore they invoke and call upon him as their defender in all their battles. And in these he has been many a time seen beating down, trampling underfoot, destroying and slaughtering the Hagarean squadrons in the sight of all, of which fact I could give thee many examples recorded in truthful Spanish histories." Sancho changed the subject and said to his master, "I marvel, Signor, at the boldness of Altisidora, the Duchess's handmaid. He whom they call Love must have cruelly pierced and wounded her. They say he is a little blind urchin who, though blear-eyed, or more properly speaking sightless, if he aims at a heart, be it ever so small, hits it and pierces it through and through with his arrows. I have heard it said, too, that the arrows of love are blunted and robbed of their points by maidenly modesty and reserve, but with this Altisidora it seems they are sharpened rather than blunted. Bear in mind, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "that love is influenced by no consideration, recognizes no restraints of reason, and is of the same nature as death, that assails alike the lofty palaces of kings and the humble cabins of shepherds. And when it takes entire possession of a heart, the first thing it does is to banish fear and shame from it. And so without shame Altisidora declared her passion, which excited in my mind embarrassment rather than commiseration." "Notable cruelty," exclaimed Sancho. "Unheard of ingratitude. I can only say for myself that the very smallest loving word of hers would have subdued me and made a slave of me. The devil! What a heart of marble, what bowels of brass, what a soul of mortar! But I can't imagine what it is that this damsel saw in your worship that could have conquered and captivated her so. What gallant vigour was it? What bold bearing? What sprightly grace? What comeliness of feature? Which of these things by itself, or what altogether, could have made her fall in love with you? For indeed and in truth many a time I stop to look at your worship from the sole of your foot to the topmost hair of your head, and I see more to frighten one than to make one fall in love. Moreover, I have heard say that beauty is the first and main thing that excites love, and as your worship has none at all, I don't know what the poor creature fell in love with." "Recollect, Sancho," replied Don Quixote, "there are two sorts of beauty, one of the mind, the other of the body. That of the mind displays and exhibits itself in intelligence, in modesty, in honourable conduct, in generosity, in good breeding, and all these qualities are possible and may exist in an ugly man. And when it is this sort of beauty and not that of the body that is the attraction, love is apt to spring up suddenly and violently. I, Sancho, perceive clearly enough that I am not beautiful, but at the same time I know I am not hideous, and it is enough for an honest man not to be a monster to be an object of love, if only he possesses the endowments of mind I have mentioned." While engaged in this discourse, they were making their way through a wood that lay beyond the road, when suddenly, without expecting anything of the kind, Don Quixote found himself caught in some nets of green cord stretched from one tree to another, and unable to conceive what it could be, he said to Sancho, "Sancho, it strikes me this affair of these nets will prove one of the strangest adventures imaginable. May I die if the enchanters that persecute me are not trying to entangle me in them and delay my journey, by way of revenge for my obduracy towards Altisidora. Well then, let me tell them that if these nets, instead of being green cord, were made of the hardest diamonds, or stronger than that wherewith the jealous god of blacksmiths enmeshed Venus and Mars, I would break them as easily as if they were made of rushes or cotton threads. But just as he was about to press forward and break through all, suddenly from among some trees two shepherdesses of surpassing beauty presented themselves to his sight, or at least damsels dressed like shepherdesses, save that the jerkins and sayers were of fine brocade, that is to say, the sayers were rich farthingales of gold-embroidered tabby. Their hair, that in its golden brightness feed with the beams of the sun itself, fell loose upon their shoulders and was crowned with garlands twined with green laurel and red everlasting, and their years to all appearance were not under 15 nor above 18. Such was the spectacle that filled Sancho with amazement. Fascinated Don Quixote made the sun halt in his course to behold them, and held all four in a strange silence. One of the shepherdesses, at length, was the first to speak and said to Don Quixote, "Hold, Sir Knight, and do not break these nets, for they are not spread here to do you any harm, but only for our amusement. And as I know you will ask why they have been put up, and who we are, I will tell you in a few words. In a village some 2 leagues from this, where there are many people of quality and rich gentlefolk, it was agreed upon by a number of friends and relations to come with their wives, sons, and daughters, neighbors, friends, and kinsmen, and make holiday in this spot, which is one of the pleasantest in the whole neighborhood, setting up a new pastoral Arcadia among ourselves, we maidens dressing ourselves as shepherdesses, and the youths as shepherds. We have prepared 2 eclogues, one by the famous poet Garcilaso, the other by the most excellent Camoens, in its own Portuguese tongue, but we have not as yet acted them. Yesterday was the first day of our coming here. We have a few of what they say are called field tents pitched among the trees on the bank of an ample brook that fertilizes all these meadows. Last night we spread these nets in the trees here to snare the silly little birds that, startled by the noise we make, may fly into them. If you please to be our guests, Signor, you will be welcomed heartily and courteously, for here just now neither care nor sorrow shall enter." She held her peace and said no more, and Don Quixote made answer, "Of a truth, fairest lady, Actaeon, when he unexpectedly beheld Diana bathing in the stream, could not have been more fascinated and wonder-struck than I at the sight of your beauty. I commend your mode of entertainment, and thank you for the kindness of your invitation. And if I can serve you, you may command me with full confidence of being obeyed, for my profession is none other than to show myself grateful, and ready to serve persons of all conditions, but especially persons of quality such as your appearance indicates. And if, instead of taking up, as they probably do, but a small space, these nets took up the whole surface of the globe, I would seek out new worlds through which to pass, so as not to break them, and that ye may give some degree of credence to this exaggerated language of mine. Know that it is no less than Don Quixote of La Mancha that makes this declaration to you, if indeed it be that such a name has reached your ears." "Ah, friend of my soul," instantly exclaimed the other shepherdess, "what great good fortune has befallen us! Seest thou this gentleman we have before us? Well then, let me tell thee he is the most valiant and the most devoted and the most courteous gentleman in all the world, unless a history of his achievements that has been printed and I have read is telling lies and deceiving us. I will lay a wager that this good fellow who is with him is one Sancho Panza his squire, whose drolleries none can equal." "That's true," said Sancho. "I am the same droll and squire you speak of, and this gentleman is my master Don Quixote of La Mancha, the same that's in the history and that they talk about." "Oh, my friend," said the other, "let us entreat him to stay, for it will give our fathers and brothers infinite pleasure. I too have heard just what thou hast told me of the valour of the one and the drolleries of the other, and what is more, of him they say that he is the most constant and loyal lover that was ever heard of, and that his lady is one Dulcinea del Toboso, to whom all over Spain the palm of beauty is awarded. "And justly awarded," said Don Quixote, "unless, indeed, your unequal beauty makes it a matter of doubt. But spare yourselves the trouble, ladies, of pressing me to stay, for the urgent calls of my profession do not allow me to take rest under any circumstances." At this instant there came up to the spot where the four stood a brother of one of the two shepherdesses, like them in shepherd costume, and as richly and gaily dressed as they were. They told him that their companion was the valiant Don Quixote of La Mancha, and the other Sancho his squire, of whom he knew already from having read their history. The gay shepherd offered him his services and begged that he would accompany him to their tents, and Don Quixote had to give way and comply. And now the game was started, and the nets were filled with a variety of birds that, deceived by the color, fell into the danger they were flying from. Upwards of 30 persons, all gaily attired as shepherds and shepherdesses, assembled on the spot, and were at once informed who Don Quixote and his squire were, whereat they were not a little delighted, as they knew of him already through his history. They repaired to the tents, where they found tables laid out, and choicely, plentifully, and neatly furnished. They treated Don Quixote as a person of distinction, giving him the place of honor, and all observed him, and were full of astonishment at the spectacle. At last, the cloth being removed, Don Quixote, with great composure, lifted up his voice and said, "One of the greatest sins that men are guilty of is, some will say pride, but I say ingratitude, going by the common saying that hell is full of ingrates. This sin, so far as it has lain in my power, I have endeavored to avoid ever since I have enjoyed the faculty of reason. And if I am unable to requite good deeds that have been done me by other deeds, I substitute the desire to do so. And if that be not enough, I make them known publicly. For he who declares and makes known the good deeds done to him will repay them by others if it were in his power. And for the most part, those who receive are the inferiors of those who give. Thus, God is superior to all because he is the supreme giver, and the offerings of man fall short by an infinite distance of being a full return for the gifts of God. But gratitude in some degree makes up for this deficiency and shortcoming. I, therefore, grateful for the favor that has been extended to me here, and unable to make a return in the same measure, restricted as I am by the narrow limits of my power, offer what I can and what I have to offer in my own way. And so I declare that for 2 full days I will maintain in the middle of this highway leading to Saragossa, that these ladies disguised as shepherdesses, who are here present, are the fairest and most courteous maidens in the world, excepting only the peerless Doña de Bosso, sole mistress of my thoughts, be it said without offense to those who hear me, ladies and gentlemen." On hearing this, Sancho, who has been listening with great attention, cried out in a loud voice, "Is it possible there is anyone in the world who will dare to say and swear that this master of mine is a madman? Say, gentlemen shepherds, is there a village priest, be he ever so wise or learned, who could say what my master has said? Or is there a knight-errant, whatever renown he may have as a man of valor, that could offer what my master has offered now?" Don Quixote turned upon Sancho, and with a countenance glowing with anger said to him, "Is it possible, Sancho, there is anyone in the whole world who will say thou art not a fool, with a lining to match, and I know not what trimmings of impertinence and roguery? Who asked thee to meddle in my affairs, or to inquire whether I am a wise man or a blockhead? Hold thy peace, answer me not a word. Saddle Rocinante if he be unsettled, and let us go to put my offer into execution. For with the right that I have on my side, thou mayest reckon as vanquish all who shall venture to question it." In a great rage, and showing his anger plainly, he rose from his seat, leaving the company lost in wonder, and making them feel doubtful whether they ought to regard him as a madman or a rational being. In the end, though they sought to dissuade him from involving himself in such a challenge, assuring him they admitted his gratitude as fully established, and needed no fresh proofs to be convinced of his valiant spirit, as those related in the history of his exploits were sufficient, still Don Quixote persisted in his resolve, and mounted on Rocinante, bracing his buckler on his arm and grasping his lance, he posted himself in the middle of a high road that was not far from the green meadow. Sancho followed on Dapple, together with all the members of the pastoral gathering, eager to see what would be the upshot of his vainglorious and extraordinary proposal. Don Quixote then, having, as has been said, planted himself in the middle of the road, made the welkin ring with words to this effect. Ho, ye travellers and wayfarers, knights, squires, folk on foot or on horseback, who pass this way or shall pass in the course of the next 2 days. Know that Don Quixote of La Mancha, knight-errant, is posted here to maintain by arms that the beauty and courtesy enshrined in the nymphs that dwell in these meadows and groves surpass all upon earth, putting aside the lady of my heart, the Dina de Toboso. Wherefore, let him who is of the opposite opinion come on, for here I await him. Twice he repeated the same words, and twice they fell unheard by any adventurer, but fate, that was guiding affairs for him from better to better, so ordered it that shortly afterwards there appeared on the road a crowd of men on horseback, many of them with lances in their hands, all riding in a compact body and in great haste. No sooner had those who were with Don Quixote seen them, than they turned about and withdrew to some distance from the road, for they knew that if they stayed some harm might come to them. But Don Quixote with intrepid heart stood his ground, and Sancho Panza shielded himself with Rocinante's hind quarters. The troop of lancers came up, and one of them who was in advance began shouting to Don Quixote, "Get out of the way, you son of the devil, or these bulls will knock you to pieces." "Rabble," returned Don Quixote, "I care nothing for bulls, be they the fiercest Jerema breeds on these banks. Confess at once, scoundrels, that what I have declared is true, else ye have to deal with me in combat." The herdsman had no time to reply, nor Don Quixote to get out of the way even if he wished, and so the drove of fierce bulls and tame bullocks, together with the crowd of herdsmen and others who were taking them to be penned up in the village where they were to be run the next day, passed over Don Quixote and over Sancho, Rocinante and Dapple, hurling them all to the earth and rolling them over on the ground. Sancho was left crushed, Don Quixote scared, Dapple belabored, and Rocinante in no very sound condition. They all got up, however, at length, and Don Quixote, in great haste, stumbling here and falling there, started off running after the drove, shouting out, "Hold, stay, ye rascally rabble! A single knight awaits you, and he is not of the temper or opinion of those who say, 'For a flying enemy make a bridge of silver.'" The retreating party in their haste, however, did not stop for that, or heed his menaces any more than last year's clouds. Weariness brought Don Quixote to a halt, and more enraged than avenged, he sat down on the road to wait until Sancho, Rocinante, and Dapple came up. When they reached him, master and men mounted once more, and without going back to bid farewell to the mock or imitation Arcadia, and more in humiliation than contentment, they continued their journey.
好，呢一節就發生咗3件事。第一件事就係 Don Quixote 同 Sancho 喺路上遇到一啲農夫啊，咁佢哋身邊就有啲木像、有啲木雕啦，就俾布冚住嘅。當佢揭開睇到入面嘅雕像 ，Don Quixote 就認為呢啲係一啲騎士嚟嘅。咁呢啲騎士保家衛國，同佢自己一樣，都認為呢啲係佢哋上路嚟講一啲好嘅預兆嘅。Don Quixote 同 Sancho 繼續上路。而 Sancho 經過呢件事之後咧，佢都不禁好歡喜啊，同 Don Quixote 講嘅話，啱啱發生呢件事，似乎就係佢哋自從上路以嚟最好嘅一件事啦。一來有好嘅預兆，二來咧佢哋竟然冇俾遇到嘅人打到起唔到身喎，好難得啊。Sancho 就話我都唔明白點解伯爵家個女僕 Altisidora 咁中意你嘅。你又老又殘，佢又咁後生點解會中意你啊？ Don Quixote 嘅解釋靚呢有兩面嘅，唔係淨係講外表。我知道我唔係靚，但係我都唔係醜，但係我嘅內在咧，相信就係吸引到佢嚟。到最後咧 Don Quixote 就突然之間俾一啲綠色嘅網咧纏繞住。Don Quixote 以為自己要死嘅時候咧，就出現咗兩個牧羊者。咁佢兩個咧都係好年輕貌美嘅女性嚟嘅。 就解釋原來佢哋只不過喺個森林度玩呢一啲遊戲，就係用網去捉一啲雀仔作為一個盛宴。當Quixote見到兩位嘅美貌，就同佢哋講啊，就係因為我拜服喺你嘅美貌之下，我願意為你做攔路卒。意思即係佢願意喺路上面企喺樹，然之後咧要經過嘅人都要贊同呢兩位女牧羊者嘅美貌。當然係除咗佢，當Quixote自己嘅心上人Dulcinea之外啦，佢哋就要承認呢兩位女士嘅美貌。於是乎，佢就走喺路上面就企咗喺度，Sancho都跟住佢。咁冇幾耐咧，路上咧就真係有一啲有牧人經過啦，連人帶馬咁樣衝過嚟，就要當Quixote讓路。但係咧，當Quixote當然係唔肯啦，就同佢哋講：我要你哋拜服喺呢兩位女士之下。呢班人完全唔理當Quixote，就一次過衝埋，就將當Quixote Sancho啦、馬匹啦、女仔啊全部撞飛。俾人撞到倒地不起，只能夠垂頭喪氣咁樣離開啦，都唔好意思嘅翻去呢幾位女士身邊啊。好，我哋睇下呢一節有啲咩字同大家分享。Dainty 有形容詞有名詞，形容詞係 delicately small and pretty, fastidious, especially concerning food， 意思就係一啲小巧精緻嘅嘢。如果喺食物嚟講，飲食上面嚟講咧，就係好講究，甚至乎係有啲挑食或者揀飲擇食咁樣。名詞就係 something good to eat, a delicacy， 一啲美食。Commiseration, commiseration， 名詞 sympathy and sorrow for the misfortunes of others, compassion， 同情惋惜。Comminess, C-O-M-E-L-I-N-E-S-S， 名詞 the quality of being attractive or pleasing in appearance。另外意思係 the quality of being seemly or proper in behavior。第一個就係形容個外貌好好啦，第二就係可以形容個表面上好正規或者好適當嘅行為表現啊咁樣。咁呢個 comminess 呢個字咧係 Sancho 用嚟形容 Don Quixote 嘅外貌 feature。好，我哋下一節再同大家道理聽，拜拜。